Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Are we good to go, Madam Clerk?
I believe so.
All right. Thanks to everyone for joining us. I'd like to call this September 28th meeting of the City Council of Charleston to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilwoman Del Chapo, Councilmember Shealy,
Here.
Councilmember Saccharin,
Here.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Here.
Councilmember Brady,
Present.
Councilmember Gregory,
Here.
Councilmember Waring, Councilmember Seekings,
Here.
Councilmember Shade,
Present.
Councilmember Griffin,
Here.
Councilmember Appel,
Here.
Councilwoman Jackson, Mayor Tecklenburg.
Here. And if you would like to join us, Councilmember Waring is going to lead us in the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we come before you, we thank you for your amazing grace, all the many blessings that you continue to provide. We pray for our country, our state, and our city. All the hard issues that divide us, we pray that through your word and teachings and applying your word in our daily lives, it'll help us to come together. Please pray for those less fortunate than us. And as we go about deliberating the hard choices on behalf of our citizens in the city of Charleston, help us to bring forth our best efforts, not intentions, but best action steps on behalf of our citizens and our staff, which is very proficient and make us look, quite frankly, better sometimes than we are. We pray for those fighting near and far on behalf of our democracy, and please protect them and their families. These prayers we ask for in your name. Let us all say amen.
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 If you
I pledge
join me
allegiance
as we
to the
recite the
flag.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to
to
the
the
flag
flag
of the
of
United
the
States
United States of America
and to the
and to
republic
the republic
for
for which it stands,
one nation under God,
nation under God, indivisible,
with
Liberty and justice
justice for all.
Thank you very much. Now, just very briefly before we go to our presentations, I would like to make two other recognitions, and maybe we can do something more formal at our next meeting. But firstly, in addition to the beautiful weather we enjoyed this past weekend, we had an amazingly successful Cooper River Bridge run, first one in 30 months. And I want to give a particular shout out to Paul Wieters, who represented the city so well on the board, along with Laurie Yarborough. There are two official city representatives on the board, but also Councilmember Seekings serves on the Cooper River Bridge Run board as well. And y'all did a terrific job this past weekend. It just went like clockwork, and great job. Congratulations. So also I want to, and I do believe we'll have a more formal recognition next time, but how about those River Dogs? First time in 99 years that our Charleston baseball team has been the conference championships. It was a very exciting game Sunday night. So anyway, congratulations to our friend Dave Eccles and to the Charleston River Dogs. They had an amazing season. So next up, officially, we want to recognize International Literacy Month and National Adult Education and Family Literacy Week. Since its founding back in 1972 by Pat Gibson, Trident Literacy Association has evolved into a well-respected leading agency in adult education with the mission to help adults reverse the cycle and impact of generational poverty and illiteracy through the acquisition of vital life skills. Eileen Chepnick and some other representatives are with us from the Trident Literacy Association, and I will read our proclamation and then ask Eileen to make a few remarks in behalf the association. Whereas the need for highly literate citizenry increases as our community moves towards an increasingly technological future, and whereas approximately 15% of adults in the city of Charleston experience literacy challenges that can severely impact on their lives and families, their ability to work productively, and their full participation as citizens and residents. Whereas Trident Literacy Association provides individualized instruction to adults in the city of Charleston virtually and in partnership with the St. Julian Divine Community Center to help them improve their skills, earn their GEDs, and win career-ready certificates, enter continuing education, take advantage of apprenticeship opportunities, and enter higher education, the military or job market. Whereas Trident Literacy Association has served our community and helped our citizens transform their lives for 49 years, almost at your golden anniversary next year. Whereas the city of Charleston recognizes the economic and societal importance of literacy and applauds Trident Literacy Association for all they do to make literacy possible for all our citizens. Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, hereby proclaim September 2021 as Literacy Month, and this week, 19th through 25th, as National Adult Education and Family Literacy Week, or last week. Congratulations. Eileen, thank you for the work you do in our community. It's really
I see Eileen.
remarkable. And Eileen, if you'd like to address the council in our meeting, we welcome you at this time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor Tecklenburg. Also, somewhere on this meeting tonight is our board chair, Joanne Sherman, and one of our education managers, Diane McGee. I've been coming to this council almost 17 years during Family Literacy Week. I missed last year because of COVID. I'm so happy to be back this year. And want to thank the city for your support and your partnership in our facility downtown. So as the mayor said, in 2022, Trident Literacy will celebrate our 50th anniversary. Who would have thought that from our humble beginnings, using a shoebox of index cards to track students and tutors, that we would grow into the award-winning program we are today, changing the lives of tens of thousands of students in the Tri-County over the years, helping them rise out of poverty, giving them dignity, and helping our economy by creating a pipeline to the workforce. COVID brought us many challenges, and we met them head on. We shifted to complete virtual instruction. We provided Chromebooks to our students who didn't have computers, and our staff and volunteer tutors worked day and night and even on weekends to accommodate their scheduling needs. For the city of Charleston, this meant that we were able to provide instruction for more students than we did at the St. Julian Divine Center and the Mary Shaw Community Center. We recently reopened for in-person instruction, and we're keeping the virtual option as well, which suits a lot of our students. This was surely a silver lining, if there could be one. I'd like to share two examples of how your generosity has helped our students. First, Kayshawn. Kayshawn is a single mother with 3 children under 5, all boys, 2 of them twins. All of them have health problems. You know, every one of our students has a story and a package. In Kayshawn's case, she dropped out of school because she was going to be 18 in the 9th grade. She was immature and always in trouble. It took several years for her to realize that she needed her education. And now she's 28 and wants a better life for her children. She came to us last year and worked hard all year while holding down a job and taking care of her children. A generous donor bought her a computer and a printer so she could participate virtually. She worked with her tutor, she did her assignments after she put her children to bed. Kayshawn earned her GED in June, and she's now enrolled in Trident Tech in the respiratory care program. She's determined to receive her AA degree, and she'll have a good paying job in a high demand field. Next, I want to share Lawrence. Lawrence dropped out of school when he was 16 to help his mother take care of his grandmother, who was ill. A few years later, his grandmother passed away. When Lawrence was 22, he started thinking about his future. He enrolled in Trident Literacy and tried to work on his studies while holding down 2 jobs, one full-time and one part-time. But it just was too much, and he kept starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And that was in 2015. But Lawrence had a goal to earn his GED by the time he was 30. And this past year, while still working 2 jobs 7 nights a week, he finally earned his GED at age 29, 6 years after he first enrolled, but he met his goal. And now he's enrolled in Trident Tech. I think it's in an HVAC program. And when he completes it, he'll qualify for a good paying job. Lawrence and Kayshawn are 2 examples, but they are inspirations for their tenacious commitment, and they are examples of all of our students. They contribute to our vibrant economy. I mean, when our students finish our program and earn their degree, they contribute to our economy. They embed literacy as a family value, and they reverse the effects of systemic poverty. And thanks to the city of Charleston and your generosity, you make this happen. Thank you for having us again tonight.
Thank you, Eileen. And I think we just play a little small, tiny part. You do the heavy lift, you and your volunteers and everybody with Trident Literacy. And how do you like our newly renovated St. Julian Divine Center?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you again for being with us and for all that y'all do. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to give a shout.
Councilmember Shea.
I just want to give a shout out to Eileen. She's lives in my district across the highway from me, and I see her and her husband walking very regularly, and just I'm so proud to know her, and so proud that she lives in my district. And anything we can do to support y'all's work, Eileen, you know we are behind you 100%. Thank you for all that
Thank you, Peter. I'm proud of you as my councilman.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. So one other presentation this evening, and we have Meredith Clark with us, who is an attorney with Motley Rice. And this is a proclamation that we normally do every year as well, due to its importance, and that's regarding mesothelioma. So I'll give the proclamation, and Meredith, call on you to make a few remarks. Whereas mesothelioma is an aggressive asbestos-related cancer that affects the linings of the lungs, abdomen, heart, or other organs. Heavy use of asbestos in manufacturing, industry, and construction has been recognized as the worst occupational health hazard in United States history. Asbestos was used in construction in virtually all office buildings, public schools, and homes before 1975. A high percentage of all mesothelioma victims were exposed to asbestos on naval ships and in shipyards, including Charleston, South Carolina. And in fact, South Carolina ranks 18th in the nation in mesothelioma rates per 100,000. And unfortunately, the port city of Charleston has rates above the state and national averages. Anyway, whereas exposure to asbestos for as little as 1 month can result in mesothelioma 30 years later, it's occupational, Navy service related, household, or even incidental exposures and a very long latency of the disease. Tens of millions of Americans are now at risk for developing mesothelioma. Whereas for decades, the need for research to develop effective treatments for mesothelioma was overlooked, whereas the result of this neglect is that treatments available today generally have only a limited effect, and most patients die within 12 to 15 months of diagnosis. Whereas the establishment of Mesothelioma Awareness Day would raise public awareness of the disease and the need to develop effective treatments for it. Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, do hereby proclaim today, September 26th, as Mesothelioma Awareness Day in the City of Charleston. And I think I've shared with council before, but I have to think of it every time I read this proclamation that my dear brother-in-law, Willie Pace, was a victim of mesothelioma after working at the Charleston Naval Shipyard years ago, and it touches close to home. Meredith, would you like to share any remarks?
I will, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that. And our condolences to your family as well. On behalf of Motley Rice, our clients, and countless others who have been affected by mesothelioma, thank you for declaring September 26th Mesothelioma Awareness Day and for your commitment to raising awareness on this very important issue. I've been honored to represent clients in South Carolina and throughout the country to tell their stories and how they were exposed, to aid them in their fight for a cure for mesothelioma, and to put an end to asbestos exposure once and for all. As you know, this proclamation means so much to the many victims of mesothelioma. As you mentioned, many of which are exposed during their hard working hours and jobs such as firefighters, shipyard workers, power and chemical plant workers, and construction and other industries. Recently, our fight has even turned to representing victims exposed to asbestos found in commercial products such as baby powder and powdered makeup. Last year, Johnson & Johnson ceased the production of their talc-based baby powder in the United States and Canada, thanks to thousands of lawsuits that were unfortunately filed on behalf of victims of their products. Concerns about the safety of talcum powder have prompted bans for cosmetic use in the European Union, as well as restricted use in baby products in Canada. Unfortunately, there's few regulations or enforcement policies here in the United States. And many are shocked to learn that asbestos is still not fully banned in the United States. The more light we can shed on this issue, the better. Thank you again for helping to bring awareness to this issue and remembering all those who have been affected and will be affected.
Thank you. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you. Appreciate you being with us, and good luck representing your clients in this matter. All right, so next up is our public hearings. I think we have 4 of those this evening, and I'll call on Mr. Morgan, Christopher Morgan, present these one at a time. I don't think we have a lot of folks signed up for them. Mr. Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm going to share the screen here, and we will go to the presentation. All right, so number 1 and number 2 under your public hearings are the same site and related to one another.
Let's take those together.
Okay, and this is about a 2/3 acre site. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parcels. It's a request to rezone from general business to mixed use workforce housing, MU2 WH. And to orient you to the site, this is Cumberland Street running east and west. This is Church Street running north and south, and State Street, and it backs up to Lingard here. This is just south of Market Street on the peninsula. There are some other images here. The item number 2 is to take these same properties and remove them from the accommodations overlay. So in other words, they are not interested in having a hotel on this site now. They've been approved for one in the past, but with this zoning change and the greater density from a residential standpoint, they're not interested in the hotel. So they would voluntarily remove themselves via this application here. We have some images. This is in our current plan. It's in the urban core area, so this is compatible. This change in zoning is compatible with that. Here are some aerial photos. There are some historic structures in here, such as at the corner here at Cumberland and Church, and then other vacant areas up at Lingard and the vacant lot at the corner of State and Cumberland that make up the site. This is an aerial photo of that. And again, you see some of those facades from this image. And here is an image of the building that's at the corner of Church and Cumberland Streets. And here's an image of the surface parking lot at Cumberland and State. So we will go back to the cover sheets and just, again, go over that real quickly. Planning Commission did recommend approval of this and both of these items, as did staff, and it comes to you now for your decision.
Madam Clerk, did we have anyone signed up to speak on this matter?
Yes, sir. We have one person signed up to speak, Brian Hellman. And did you want to set a time limit?
2 minutes, please. Mr.
Mr.
Hellman?
Hellman?
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Mayor Tecklenburg and members of council, I'm Brian Hellman at 105 Broad Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this matter tonight. My client actually has this property under contract to purchase it, and from the applicant, Cumberland LLC. The intent is, even though a 50-room hotel was approved on this site, my client's intent is to build residential. So we have an unusual request before you tonight, which is to unwind an approved 50-room hotel with about 10,000 square feet of meeting space. In theory, it's obviously still approved, so it has a vested right, but my client's intent is to build residential here. To build residential, we've got to get the zoning to MU2, and that's what our request is tonight, and also to remove it from the accommodations overlay. So happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else like to be heard on this matter? It comes to council.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Hellman or any discussion?
And just to confirm, the motion is for E1 and E2.
Correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Morgan?
Thank you.
Okay, then your item E3 had a technical snafu with the copy that got to you all for the zoning amendment, and it did not have the items highlighted in red that were the changes to the ordinance. So we're going to defer that to next month's public hearing. I don't know if anybody had signed up to speak on that, but otherwise I didn't see if we needed to have further discussion on that.
We do not have anyone signed up to speak on it.
I'll move to defer this item.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor of the deferral, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Morgan?
And this is, have the wrong number on here, but this is number 4E4. This is 233 Riverland Drive, and it is a recent annexation into the city. It was R4 in Charleston County. It would be zoned SR1 in the city of Charleston. Planning Commission approved that unanimously.
And no one has signed up to speak on this
Move
matter.
for approval.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. So thank you. Next is the approval of our city council minutes. I'm sorry?
17th. Move for approval.
We got a motion to approve the minutes from August 17th.
Second.
We got a second. Any corrections, deletions, additions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. So next up is our citizens participation period. Madam Clerk, I believe you had 8 folks signed up to make remarks to us this evening.
Yes, sir.
So let's do 2 minutes each and see where we go, because I know you have some other comments maybe to report to us as well.
Our first speaker is Billy Haller. If you're on the line, if you could press *6. Billy Haller. Next is Chris Ann Dalton. If you're on the line, if you could press *6. Chris Ann Dalton. Next is Tamika Gadsden. If you're on the line, if you could press *6, Tamika Gadsden.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Hello, can you hear me?
This is Tamika Gadsden, calling from area code, zip code 294-414. I'm calling and I want to submit comment regarding last city council meeting. I'm very happy to see that we've extended the meeting, the citizens participation comment period back to 2 minutes. I just want to remind City Council and leadership that, public input is critical to the building the city, is critical to the success of the city, and we need to have more participation. And also, I'd like to give a comment about the special commission. I believe that Amber Johnson and her commission should have the same courtesy extended to her that you did for Chief Reynolds when you amended the First Amendment ordinance or the protest ordinance. I think Amber deserves her own moment, and she deserves not to have to compete with a frenzied crowd of anti-science, anti-maskers. I think she is due that, and she needs to have her commission funded and fully supported by the city, 100%. And thank you.
All right, and I think we had someone trying to speak.
Chrisanne, I'm sorry. I finally figured out the phone. Is it okay to speak? This is Chrisanne Dalton.
Yes, ma'am. Please state your address as
Thank
well.
you. Thank you so much. I want to say good evening to you all. Thank you so much for your time. I am here to speak about the mask mandate tonight. And originally I was going to go through graphs and charts to support what I thought, but instead I ended up at Barnes & Noble and I sat myself down in the children's section. And you're probably wondering, what the heck am I doing in the children's section? But children's books are a brilliant way to answer complex questions. And that's what we need right now, is simple answers to life's big questions. And I absolutely fell in love with this one book, Turtle in the Tree. It was by Nisha Hudson. And in the story, two dogs are looking deep into a tree. And one dog sees a turtle and he's sure of it. And then another dog sees a squirrel and he's sure of it. And then the story comically develops, and each dog is starting to rationalize how the other can't possibly be right. And the next thing you know, poof, a squirrel springs out of the tree. And then it's followed by a loud thud, and there's a turtle, which makes the dogs ever so happy because, wow, the other dog was right. And they were right too. And both dogs were very happy. So that's what I see as the beauty in Charleston. I think Charlestonians long ago have figured out the answer to the mask mandate. And I see it every day when I walk outside, and when I grocery shop, and I eat with my family. I think everyone out there, and I see everyone out there, is doing their own thing, and others accept it. And that is wonderful. So tonight, I am not suggesting that the council make a yes or no vote on this ordinance. Instead, I would suggest a motion and a vote to table this ordinance indefinitely. Because like the dogs and a turtle in a tree had figured out, and Charlestonians too, both sides can be right, and that isn't wrong. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next is
Thank
Marcus McDonald. Marcus McDonald, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Marcus McDonald. All right, next is Mike Trama. If you're on the line, if you could press *6.
Yeah,
Mike.
hi, Jennifer. You kicked me out of the Zoom. I was planning to share slides. And also, you had skipped Billy earlier, so let's give Billy an opportunity to dial in also. So in the last meeting, I asked you all to complete your IAT assessments. And I'm assuming no one actually knew what I was talking about. So I was going to pull up Project Implicit. Not necessarily for you guys, because I know you guys don't listen to me, but the other 7 people on the phone, go to Project Implicit, take your implicit bias assessments, share your scores with your council members. So like Carol's my rep, right? So I sent Carol my scores, and I was like, Carol, I strongly am biased towards abled people over disabled people. So I need to fight against my bias, right? I need to fight for legislation that supports disabled people because I'm biased against disabled people. So transparency, y'all, right? That's what we need to hold our folks accountable for. Please, I know Mika, Marcus, Billy, Megzi, I know you guys are actually listening to me. Carol, I hope you're listening to me because you're my district person. The rest of you, I'm assuming you're not listening to me. I had great slides to back this up, but Jennifer, you kicked me out of the Zoom. Thank you for the 2 minutes. I was able to speak like a normal person instead of, how I listen to podcasts at like triple speed like you made me do last week in 30 seconds. That said, people are still getting sick and dying of COVID. Please wear a mask, wash your hands, quarantine, be safe. We need everyone to stay healthy so our economy can get back to work, guys. Thanks, y'all. Someone please move to District 10 and run against Harry Griffin. I do not want to see a racist. He brought Corey Allen here, who's a known racist and institutionalist, and the police did nothing about that. So we got to get this guy out of office as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Burnett Maybank, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Burnett Maybank.
I am. Can y'all hear me?
We can.
All right, good. I'll just be a few, not long. I'm here on behalf of the Charleston County Aviation Authority. I'm the lawyer for the Charleston County Aviation Authority, and I'm here to comment on the proposed bid district. And I just had
Mr. Maybank, could I interrupt you 1 second? We did amend our mid agreement already at Ways and Means to remove the airport from that district, just to let you know.
All right, well, I'll quit while I'm ahead. How about those Tigers?
Well, we welcome you to continue making any comments you would like, sir.
Well, I'll just real quickly, the ordinance is complicated or confusing. It seems to me to say that the assessment ratio is $480, a flat fee of $480. State law gives you various methods to impose the assessment, assess value per parcel, value of any improvements. But it appears to me to flatly read it's $480, whether you're a 2,000 square foot law firm or a 60,000 square foot hotel. And I certainly didn't think that that's what y'all, you're not going to raise a whole lot of money on $480 per parcel. So I would encourage you to look at that. It doesn't really add up to me. And we just wanted to be sure, there's an aviation authority property. That's what we wanted excluded from the mid. And if that property is excluded from the mid, then we're perfectly fine with it.
Good. Thank you, sir. And if you don't mind, we might give you a call next week regarding your other remarks.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Lynn J. Lynn J. If you're on the line, if you could press *6. Lynn J. All right, next is Allison Benedetti. If you're on the line, if you could press *6. Allison Benedetti.
This is Billy. It might be a good time for me to jump back in.
We were going to come back to you, and I think you would have been next. So please proceed, Billy.
Oh, awesome. Well, what I'd like to say is that the surveillance of Charleston racial justice advocates through the Seahawk program reflects the city's desire for security, needless to say. Excluded from this security are securities that affect the service-employed, homeless, and non-white people of Charleston. Securities such as housing, food, and ecological security. Skyrocketing rents and the criminalization of homelessness essentially outlaw impoverished people from the peninsula. The racist distribution of fresh food outlets combined with our weak transportation system ensures that predominantly African-American communities rely heavily on dollar stores and bodegas for their groceries. The flooding, which receives no attention on President Street, is being actively guarded against on the Battery. By surveilling justice advocates instead of white supremacist groups, the city has revealed its priorities: the security of real estate interests, white supremacy, and our penal institutions. The Commission on Equity, Inclusion, Racial Justice should be permanently reestablished in order to shift the city's security focus. And I appreciate the amount of time y'all gave us to speak, to actually participate in this democracy. That should be the norm.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us tonight.
All right, so I'm going to go back and call the names that we called earlier. Marcus McDonald. If you're on the line, if you could press *6. Marcus McDonald. Next is Lynn J. If you're on the line, if you could press *6, Lynn J. Next is Allison Benedetti. If you're on the line, if you could press *6, Allison Benedetti. All right, we will move on to our comments. We had one person say that and these were the comments that were submitted online, as well as comments submitted by phone, and all of these were sent to the council members in advance of the meeting. One person said her daughter attended private school, wore no mask, and did not get COVID. She asked that City Council vote no to the mask mandate and leave the decision for parents to decide what was best for their children. One person said it was absurd to limit citizens to 30 seconds to speak on complex matters, and it was an attempt to diminish the democratic process. One person discouraged the mask ordinance.
Hello?
Required.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Charlotte.
I don't think
I've been waiting on the phone for 35 minutes.
Well, you are.
We didn't have that name on the list, Mr. Mayor. One person discouraged the mask ordinance that required masks be worn in any City of Charleston building, since they were unable to wear face coverings due to serious health conditions. 3 people said to vote no to mask mandates. One person said the surveillance of Black activists by the Charleston Police Department was an abuse of power that violated privacy and safety of Charleston citizens, that the emails should be investigated and officers should be held accountable. One person asked that City Council support the reinstatement of the Commission on Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation. They also asked for a community-run organization with subpoena power that could aid in police, and that accountability, and that there be accountability regarding the surveillance of Black activists, as that was unjust. One person said that masks did not stop the spread of COVID and urged City Council to not mandate them. Wearing masks cause negative consequences, including breathing in less oxygen, inhaling bacteria and germs from the masks, and that the same logic applied to vaccines. And those are all the comments that we received.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I think that's the end of our citizens' participation period for this evening. And for those who are on the call, do take note that for our sign up, there is a requirement to do so by 12 o'clock on the Monday before, the day before the meeting. So catch us next time. Just get signed up by the day before the next meeting. We'll be glad to have you. And thanks to those who did participate with us this evening. So next up is our petitions and communications. And first is our city's response to COVID-19. I think Tracy McKee is on the call and might have a quick intro, and then we'll call on, we're so blessed really to have Dr. Michael Sweat with us again this evening to give us an update from our medical community. Tracy?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Just really quickly, I know that everyone, I think, enjoys getting a little bit of our employee update. So our cases and employees have gone down similarly to like they have in the community. We've seen less than 3% of those cases as breakthrough cases. I think we're up to 64% of our staff being vaccinated as well. And as the mayor said, we are very, very lucky to have Dr. Michael Sweat with us here this evening. He's been such a tremendous partner and advisor through all of this, and really value him. And so I'm going to let him give a proper and good COVID-19 update for all of you tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Sweat.
No, thank you so much, Tracy and Mayor Tecklenburg and council members. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and do a quick update. I'll try not to take too long. Let me just get my slides organized here. So, I do want to just pardon me.
Give us some good news.
Yeah, the news is mostly pretty good. Just quickly want to give some credit to Veronique Whitaker, who's my lead research coordinator, does thankless work calculating numerous metrics that we track. We're lucky here in the Charleston area to have the molecular pathology lab at MUSC do tracking on variants. It's unusual. Most communities in the country don't have that, and they've done a fantastic job. Just to point out, as I think you're probably aware, in June, the Delta variant came in and really within weeks predominated as our major variant of COVID-19. It is highly transmissible, and it led us to have a significant outbreak over the past 2 months. I do want to just mention that they've been carefully looking at the genetics, and we are seeing some additional changes in the variant. I don't think it's labeled as Delta-like, and so there is some genetic diversity continuing. We continue to monitor that. So far, no major difference in the outcome of that, those changes in the Delta variant, and we'll keep our eye out on other variants that might come along. So in late July, really, we started seeing some major outbreaks along the coast. And then by mid-August, we started to see outbreaks in the Midlands, and really by September 16th, it was well dispersed across the state and started to lessen in the coastal areas. And here we are on the 28th, and there are a few hot spots around the state, but there's been significant declines. Here in our Tri-County area, I just do want to point out, this is the number of cases per day per 100,000, and Dorchester County has had very high rates. It's been a hot spot in the whole Southeast, and it continues to have higher rates, but it's seen significant declines just like the rest of the areas have. This is just the epidemic curve showing the number of cases per day per 100,000 population over time. This was our summer wave last year. And then we had our winter surge, which was quite significant. And then we dropped all the way down to almost no cases per day in early July. And then when Delta variant came in, we saw this rapid increase, a stark slope here, got up to 133 cases per day on September 1st. But over the past several weeks, we've seen dramatic declines occurring. There was a 35% decline in the past 7 days and a 47% decline in the past 14 days, almost cutting this in half. So we've clearly reached our peak and are seeing, have been seeing the continued declines. I do want to comment on just we do calculations and model the level of immunity in the community. And this is what's shown here. We think that right now about 74% of people have either had a recent infection in the past 7 months or have been vaccinated fully. We did see a big uptick and a fairly significant uptick in vaccination in our community from August through September, with about 6 percentage point increase. And we've also seen about 4% of the population experience an infection. So there was quite a surge that happened. And the immunity numbers are climbing. We think at some point this level of immunity will start to have effects, and it has had many effects. We're seeing actually a lower hospitalization rate now than we did in earlier surges, and it's clearly related to vaccination and immunity from prior infection. I just want to put this up to reinforce the importance and value of vaccination. This is analyses DX putting out now. 85% of the infections in the state are among people who are not fully vaccinated. 71% of hospitalizations occur among people not fully vaccinated, and 75% of deaths are occurring among people not fully vaccinated. Among that 30% or so of people who are being hospitalized who have been vaccinated, I know from our own internal data that most of those people are immunosuppressed or quite elderly and likely did not generate a very strong immune response. Boosters will likely help that as we go forward. So it's really going to be our path out of this epidemic, I believe. The only alternative is that we're going to stumble into some sort of endemic state by having very large numbers of people continue to get infected. So we're all hands, I think, need need to be on encouraging and supporting vaccination efforts. In terms of hospitalizations, this just shows the trends for the MUSC health system. And this includes all of our hospitals across the state, although the MUSC University Hospital is our largest by far. This would be last year in January, our winter surge, dropping down to very, very low numbers by July, and the peak that we've had. So we are now beginning to see declines in hospitalizations. The hospitalization rate lags a bit from the infection rate. So we are beginning to see these declines, but we're still at a very high level, and the health system is really quite stressed. We have it's quite a burden on the staff and facilities, although I would say that we've been able to, and I know other hospitals in the area as well, have been able to continue this time around to support routine medical care, sort of double duty in that with the COVID care that's been happening. Here's just showing data from Health and Human Services for area hospitals in the Charleston area that in mid-August, about 72% of our ICU beds were occupied, and that's up to 83% this week. So at 83%, we still have capacity, but it's again putting stress on the system, in particular in terms of staffing. There's a nursing shortage, and we have challenges with that, as well as respiratory therapists, lab techs, etc. Just in terms of what some of the models are showing, this is the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, of high quality model. This would be where we are more or less today, approaching October, and they're predicting that we are going to continue to see a decline in the coming weeks. But I think, as they predict as well, we're going to probably settle in at a baseline that's higher than our low value that we hit in July, because the Delta variant is present. I would add this green dotted line. They model if there was universal use of high quality masks, you would likely see a significant decline as well. So they regularly report those values. Just what's going to happen next, I think a good way to examine that is to look at what's happened in other locations that have had a Delta wave, and it really started up in Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana. So these earlier, and then spread through the coastal region of the Gulf, and pretty much all of Florida, and very similar patterns, very steep increases, fairly steep declines with a lot of volatility on the backside typically. It's settling in, it's starting to look like at a rate that's not as low as we saw originally. And here we are in South Carolina. We experienced this wave a little later than these other states. So in the weeks ahead, I think we really want to pay attention to where we're going to plateau, where we're going to end up. I just want to bring up the UK experience. They were the first to have the Delta outbreak occur. Another similar pattern, very steep increase, steep decline. Right around the midpoint of their decline, they stopped with a lot of restrictions in the country, which were quite strict at the time. And over the weeks ahead, the rates have actually gone back up substantially. And it's interesting too, because the UK has a much higher vaccination rate than we do here. In Charleston, South Carolina, 47% with 67% in the UK. And they do similar estimates of the amount of antibodies or immunity that's present either from recent infection or vaccination. And they've come out with some very high quality studies showing very high rates of immunity, between 91 and 94% across the UK. So I think a lesson from this is that even with high levels of immunity, you can continue to see high levels of transmission and infection occurring. It's going to take a little more than what we see, and probably many of these people may be getting reinfected from earlier infections. So it's just a bit of a warning to us to keep an eye on the weeks ahead as we go forward. I do want to just mention, I want to put your attention here as I end on the winter. I personally, and I'm among others too, have a concern that we may see a significant surge in the winter. This is what happened last year, and in October, after we had a significant surge through the southeast and coastal regions of the U.S., it really died down. But by October, it started to light up, particularly in Wisconsin. Soon moved over into Minnesota and the plain states, the mountain states. And by December, the whole country really lit up with infections. It sort of died down and sort of ended with the South having our big surge around January. So I worried as we go forward. The winter is a risky period, a season for transmission of respiratory illnesses historically, and we certainly have history from last year. What's a bit worrying is this is the current map for the U.S. It's really died down in the South. There's still these Delta waves are moving north. And again, we're seeing a big outbreak in the exact same area in Wisconsin. Many of the other models I'm looking at, which are much more granular, really do predict Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota are going to really start to light up again. And we're seeing big outbreaks through the mountain states and the Pacific Northwest and the Plain states. So I do think we need to keep our attention on what's going to happen this coming winter. And I think there's a significant risk. There's a lot of travel with holidays, and I think people are pretty exhausted with staying in and wearing masks, which are really protective. So just summarizing, the current status currently in the Tri-County area is what we just lowered our grade level from severe to significant, but it is improving. There are still high levels of infection. We're at 47 cases per day per 100,000 in the Tri-County area, a little lower in Charleston County. Our peak occurred at 133 cases per day per 100,000 on September 1st. So really sustained declines over the past several weeks. We do have suboptimal vaccination rates, especially among those under the age of 60, and especially among those people who are in their 20s and 30s. And we're seeing a lot of hospitalizations too among people in age 40 to 50, sort of a little bit older, maybe slightly weakened immune system, and but the vaccination rates are quite high among older people, so they're being well protected. And then hospitalizations, they still remain high in the area. There's a heavy burden on our health system. They do tend to lag the infection rate, but given our rates and the trends we're seeing, we do expect the rates in the hospital to come down in the coming weeks. Data from other areas that have had Delta waves saw those peaks occur just like ours, 4 to 6 weeks, but there are multiple states that look like they're flatlining at a higher base rate, particularly Louisiana and Florida. So it's has our attention on that. And that resurgence in the UK has everybody wondering what's going to happen. And then finally, significant concern about what's going to happen when we approach the winter. If it's similar to last year, it would be worse than we saw in the summer. And one of the big problems with those sort of massive waves that happen throughout the country is that they happen simultaneously, and it puts even greater burden on our ability to get commodities, to transfer healthcare workers, and things like monoclonal antibodies right now are in short supply. So we really hope that doesn't happen, and we will continue to keep our eye on it. So with that, I'll stop, and I appreciate again you having me here, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sweat. Councilmember Griffin?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Dr. Sweat, thank you for that presentation. Can you touch on breakthrough cases? Because I was looking at DHEC's website and I've been watching the news, and I know that breakthrough cases have gone up with this Delta surge. What does that actually mean for those people that have had a breakthrough case as we start talking about a booster? Those natural antibodies, does that mean that those individuals will not get the booster now? They'll have to wait, sort of like we talked about before, where if you got the virus, you would have to wait a certain amount of time before you could get the vaccine?
Yeah, so with regard to breakthrough infections, let's first start with breakthroughs from people who've been vaccinated. It is definitely occurring. There is some waning immunity regarding infections. They still protect quite well. People who do have breakthrough infections suffer much milder cases. The vast majority of people recover really quickly. Some people get quite ill, I will say, but they don't end up in the hospital so much. So that's truly the case. And the boosters would be, the evidence suggests strongly that boosters would actually reboost our ability to fight off infection itself. So that's one reason where you're seeing these movements towards boosters. I do want to say that data on the rate of breakthrough infections is somewhat weak. The CDC back in April decided not to track that. So the information is not as strong as we would like. And there is a lot of anecdotal data that there's a fair number of breakthroughs occurring. I think it's a good reason for people to maintain vigilance and be careful, even if they're vaccinated, because if they get a breakthrough infection, it's also known that they can transmit that onto other people. With regard to breakthrough infections for people who've had a prior infection, that is certainly happening as well. It's even less well known and less well understood. A lot of people who've had a prior infection, it happens and it doesn't get documented, and so it's harder to track. And I wouldn't call it a booster for those people because they may or may not have been vaccinated. So somebody who has had an infection, it is highly recommended to get vaccinated. In fact, it's believed those people who are vaccinated and also have had a prior infection are probably achieving very, very high levels of immunity, and it would protect them going forward. So we really want to watch the issue of breakthroughs for both people who are vaccinated and unvaccinated.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sweat.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. Yes, and I join all my colleagues in thanking you, Dr. Sweat. I know you have a full day every day, and I know that you're also a standby resource for questions that come in. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
That personal service to us. I was just listening to one of the statements that you were making under the hospitalizations, and it's great that things are, becoming more manageable. You mentioned that some of the challenges, not so much lack of shortage of beds, but that there is a shortage of nurses. And I was hoping maybe, and I know you're not the recruiter in personnel per se, but do you have any insight into why the nursing shortage? Is that because part of the nursing corps is not, especially with MUSC requiring vaccinations, or are they choosing to sit out the COVID, pandemic as something that they don't want to participate in their profession? Or what would you say is the reason that we have a nursing shortage?
Yeah, just thank you for the question. It's a good question. I would preface this by saying that predating COVID, there was a nursing shortage. So when you add the added burden of COVID, the demands for healthcare from that, it amplified the impact of the shortage of nurses. There's lots of other reasons as well, some of them demographic. Many of our nurses in the nursing corps in the country were nearing retirement, just like in many other professions. And just like with many other professions, as COVID came along, a lot of people have made changes of life and decided to step back. I think the stress of COVID has also particularly hit nursing and in respiratory therapists, lab techs, others as well. I don't believe the vaccination mandate within the hospital has had much effect. We had very high vaccination rates even prior to that, and very few people stepped out of the Job Corps because of that. So there really is just a general need to put more resources into training nurses and others in the hospital system. It's a complex issue, but I think those are the main factors.
Thank you for making all those points.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, thank you, Dr. Sweat, for all that you do, not only for this council, but certainly this region. Can you touch on the booster shots for age 65 and above, and obviously the vulnerable? A little bit of confusion out there. Can you bring some clarity to that?
Yeah, it is confusing. Currently, the FDA has approved, and the CDC recommendations that were taken on and validated by the CDC director, it's now possible to get a booster shot for several categories. Certainly people 65 and above are eligible, and that had already been in place. This is for the Pfizer vaccine only at the current time. And then there's another category that's more fluid, I think, which is people who are immunosuppressed or who are at high risk. Currently, I know through MUSC, you have to make an attestation if you wish to receive a booster that you qualify. We don't have a vaccine police or anything that really drills into that. We have to trust people, I think. I anticipate that in the weeks ahead, we're likely to see booster shots opening up to a larger swath of the population. And also Moderna has applied. And I think eventually the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will also come into play for boosters. So I think if people have questions, and it can be kind of confusing to know whether you're qualified or how to go about it, I would strongly recommend checking in with the healthcare provider. And we have phone numbers. I don't have them at my fingertips, but we have a system in place where people can call and ask questions and have their questions answered.
Thank you, Dr. Swift.
Great. Any more? Well, Dr. Sweat, thank you so much. Once again, you've just been rock solid throughout, helping us and advising us. So we really value it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I think Councilman Shahid had his hand up.
Oh, Councilmember Shade.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilmember Waring. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Dr. Sweat, on our agenda tonight is a proposed ordinance to enact this mask ordinance. What is your feeling about that?
Dang, I thought I was going to get off of that.
I'm not glad you're off the hook. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let me start by saying, I personally, based on all the evidence I've seen, would strongly recommend that people wear a mask in this current state that we're in. I would be watching those numbers and looking at the trends. And I think the case rate's high enough that there's a lot of circulating virus out there, and it's prudent to wear the mask. I guess I would want to just say, and I certainly don't want to go on record as not sounding like supporting a mask, but I think, we only have so many arrows in our quiver, and you want to use them strategically. I think timing is critically important for mandates. There's a limited tolerance for mandates in the community, and you want to use them strategically when you're in a crisis situation. Those sort of mitigation steps really are most potent when we are really at a bad situation where the hospital is becoming overrun. So with that said, I believe, the numbers are coming down. I'm not sure. It might be smart to consider whether doing it now would be, I would take into account the impact that might have on your ability to use those tools later on. And I do think we're likely to see a significant outbreak in the winter. So I would bear that in mind. I totally appreciate the complicated political issues and strong feelings that people have in the community. So there's a cost benefit ratio that has to be taken into account.
You're not backing off what everybody is saying. Wash your hands, social distancing, wear a mask when possible in public, get the vaccine. If you got the vaccine and you're eligible, get the booster shot. Those are all very solid, important things that we need to be following and promoting in our community. And that hasn't changed. And I think what you're saying is we got to keep an eye on this curve to see where it's going to probably spike in maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We don't know exactly, but we have to keep our eye on the ball and to see what happens. And maybe at that point, that's when we need to come back and revisit the mask ordinance. Is that a fair?
Yes, sir. I think that's fair. I might rank order these a little. I mean, I think, vaccination, I would put at the highest level. That is going to be our route out of this epidemic, in my opinion. Mask use is critical. They really work. they're really minimally challenging to a person. You know, we're not asking somebody to storm the beaches of Normandy to wear a mask. They're not that hard to do. And so I also just want to say I pretty strongly believe in that people need to look at their own personal risk. If you're living with somebody who's immunocompromised, you probably should be more cautious. If the rates are very, very high, I would ramp up my preventative behaviors. I think it's prudent, and we can't live in a cave. And, I think so people have to look at their own personal risk profile, their own tolerance for risk, and act accordingly. So having said that, I can't stress enough that I think given where the numbers are now, I would strongly recommend that people, avoid indoor crowded restaurants and wear a mask and get a vaccine.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's a good summary. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being straight with us. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to come back to this ordinance, however, when we take up second readings. So, Dr. Sweat, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're terrific. Next up is an update and a little discussion, really nothing to take action on regarding the work that staff's been doing and connecting with the community regarding our late night ordinance. We're looking to bring you some changes to it, but we wanted to kind of share with you where we are right now. Robert Summerfield and I think Julia Copeland both want to make some remarks. Robert?
And Mayor, members of council, before Julia and I give you the actual update, we have guest starred Chief Reynolds to kind of introduce why we're making the changes. So I think he has the story of the why, and then we'll tell you what we're currently looking at as a part of those changes.
Chief?
Thank you. So this has been an ongoing iterative effort, I think a balanced approach, collaborative, a lot of research, a lot of discussion. In the last couple council sessions where we've talked about this, there are some concerns about equity and how does this apply more uniformly across the city to all businesses. How can we make sure that we're accomplishing the best outcomes? What are some of those things that we can tweak? And this committee has been talking extensively. Our legal team has done a lot of research, and all of this is focused on keeping our city safe. And I promise you, there's a lot of things that we've done that are working. And what you'll hear tonight is there's some more things that can be done to continue this effort, to continue to protect and serve our residents, our tourists, our businesses, and making sure that we're doing everything possible to keep our city safe. I support what you'll hear in a minute from Julia and Robert and their team. I can tell you from a public safety perspective, it makes sense. And I think that it's been balanced and it's been kind of ongoing over time. I think that everybody has hit the pause button on numerous occasions to see what's working, to see what maybe needs increased attention, to look at it from a legal perspective, to make sure that what we're doing is going to stand for the long game, the long term, and to do what we can in a very basic way to make sure that we shut down the area at some point at night, which you'll hear is around 1:30, 2 o'clock. And I think that what you'll hear makes a lot of sense. What we've been doing has worked, and this is going to make it even more effective, I think more fair, and achieve the best outcomes possible.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Robert?
Yes, sir. Julia, do you have the PowerPoint or do you need me to throw it up there?
I've got it. I'll get it started here. Okay, everyone. So thank you, Chief. Like Chief was saying, this is pretty much touched on every department in the city. We've got planning, police, fire marshal, business license, permitting, even neighborhood services working through this right now. And we still have some work to do, but I wanted to at least give you a taste of what we are considering as proposed changes to bring to council for first reading. And part of that is adjusting the definition as it relates to the late night entertainment establishment. We're taking entertainment out, but now we're adding two types of businesses that can fall under the definition of late night establishment. First is what you all probably know and remember is that any bar or restaurant that allows on-premises consumption of beer, wine, or alcohol as its primary use and remains open after 1 o'clock, regardless of zoning designation. With this definition, this is going to capture every bar in the Charleston area, not just King Street or the Central Business District. What we've also done is create a little breakout definition here for restaurants specific to the Central Business District to address the concerns of the police department right now with the hours of operation on King Street and the crowds and the controlling of the crowds on King Street. So section B under the definition would be any restaurant or venue that operates solely in the Central Business District past 11 o'clock, regardless of whether or not it serves alcohol. So that would be any kind of restaurant, pizzeria that's serving well into 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the morning. So some of the security and safety measures that we are considering right now, specifically for subsection A, which is bars that stay open past 11 o'clock that have their primary use is serving alcohol, is a minimum of 2 security personnel posted at each entrance beginning at the hour of 9 p.m. And that number would alter with the number of patrons in the restaurant. Right now, we've got additional security personnel would need to be added per 50 patrons within the establishment. The security personnel must be easily identified, uniforms, IDs, anything like that. And also we've changed the definition of security personnel so that it matches the statute, which has certain requirements for you to be a security personnel in this particular context. SLED checks and SLED certification. We have the requirement of the approved scanning devices for ID checks, which would begin at 9 p.m. at all entrances. And all sales would cease at 1:30 with an impending closing at 2 a.m., which is already in there now. We've also added some measures in there for continued failure to abide by the maximum occupancy load requirements. I would give PD and fire marshal the opportunity to immediately close the establishment until they comply with those requirements. Now, with regard to subsection B, which would just be restaurants, whether or not they serve alcohol in the Central Business District, the operational regulations would be similar, but not necessarily as stringent, no maximum occupancy load or security requirements. However, it would be requiring the ceasing of all sales at 1:30 and the closing of doors at 2 a.m. So this would match essentially what the food vendors are having to do presently. And also we have application requirements in there, which are very similar to what's currently in place. It would require the application for a permit along with your certificate of occupancy and your business license. And we're also considering ideas for annual renewal requirements where the owner would have to attest to compliance with the current ordinance. So that's all I have for you right now. And hopefully we're still working, hopefully we're going to have a draft for you for consideration at the next meeting. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Or Robert, do you have anything else you want to add?
I was just going to add, so, some of this is, again, all of this is an ongoing discussion amongst all the departments. We are looking at some different things though, because we do understand that some of these things are changes from current codes and policies. So how do we implement them? We are looking at potentially an incentive program that can help get the ID scanners into the hands of these businesses. So, we are looking at some things that we can do to either offset the cost or at least offset part of the cost on those ID scanners. So that's a thing that we're looking at. Additionally, we're looking at, the ability to, if you are a bad operator, well, you're just not going to get a renewal for the late night. It doesn't mean that you'd be out of business. It just, you wouldn't be able to be eligible to continue to operate a late night establishment. So again, making sure that if we have issues, we're addressing those issues specifically and not necessarily having any business go out of business. And then working on a time period for people to come into compliance with the new code, understanding, of course, that this will be changes for some of these businesses that may require them to retool some things. So we're not expecting them, you all pass an ordinance and then the next day they have to have the SLED authorized security on site meeting the uniform requirements and some other things. So all of this it has a certain level of reasonableness that's being applied to it in terms of the timing. We do want to work with the business community on how this gets implemented, if in fact it does get moved forward.
All right. So Councilmember Mitchell has his hand up, and then Councilmember Shade.
That's what I was asking a quick question. That's the same thing I was alluding to what Robert was talking about. I remember one time, Mr. Mayor, we had a meeting with all the businesses and to inform them of a lot of changes that was going to be made. Will this be something that we will try to do again if we come up with this new the rules that we're going to implement, try to implement? Could something like that happen again?
Yes, we will be working with the community. So as Julie mentioned, our business services group is a part of the team that's doing this to look at what these changes might encompass. And so getting out to the business community and making sure they understand what the rules are, if they are changing, as well as working with them if the rules do change, working with them on a schedule for implementation of those rules. Because again, we're not anticipating that everybody can be compliant with the letter of this proposed ordinance on day one. There will be a period for people to be able to come up to speed with it, and we'll work with them on doing that.
But you're not going to take them as a group as we did once before. I mean, we had one at the Visitor Center. We had a big meeting with a lot of the businesses at that time, explaining to them what the changes that was going to be taking place, even when we have it blocked off the way we did. I think we got good reception from a lot of the business there, at least on King Street. So I just wonder if something like that could be formed, so you wouldn't have to be running from one place to the other. If there's something could be made, even if you do it in two sessions, right. Something like that. That's just a suggestion.
Absolutely, we can organize something like that.
Okay,
that would be a good idea, Robert, to reconvene that group that Meg put together, and then also your restaurant advisory group to run this by them as well.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll pose this question to whoever can address it. But one of the concerns I thought that was floating around in this area was the establishments that were still serving food, but was not serving alcohol, and then establishments that were a business that was selling like a late night grocery store alcohol. So are we addressing that as a concern as well? How do these proposals address those matters?
Those, Councilman, those are your B group. So your A group is those who are restaurants or bars, or alcohol is a big piece of their business. The B group now captures basically everybody else. If you're in the central business district and you want to operate late night, you would be B, and so you would be under that. So if you're just a restaurant or a walk-up window, or you're the little bodega, whatever that might be, if you're operating late night, you're going to be B, and you're not going to have the security requirements and some of the occupancy issues that or not issues, but restrictions. But what you are going to have is you're still going to have a required closing time where you take your last order at 1:30 and you're closed up by 2 o'clock.
All right, so I just want to make sure I'm following all that. So if I am a restaurant but not serving alcohol, I fall into that B group, and I'm going to be subject to some restrictions as to what time I'm going to close.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And you're going to need to do the permitting requirements for a late night establishment.
And if I'm an establishment that's just not serving in-house food, but just off-the-shelf food, I'm going to fall into that same kind of category B as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear on that, because we went into that pretty quickly. All right, and I think that addresses some of the concerns that the chief may have had with those kind of establishments.
So just for clarification, and I'm not arguing it one way or the other, but I just want to understand where you are with it. If, for example, I had a corner convenience store, not off on-premise consumption, but you could buy a 6-pack and walk out the door with it. Am I still able to conduct business and sell alcohol after 2 o'clock?
No, sir, not in the central business district. You're not.
All right, just wanted to be clear on that. Thanks. All right, any other questions? Y'all think y'all will have something back to us by the next meeting or
Mr. Mayor,
after that?
Councilmember
Correct.
Saccharin has his hand up.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I saw it as soon as I started asking that question. Councilmember Saccharin.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I know I've been vocal about my concerns for the small food carts. So I think this is a great compromise. I think it's practical and it's pragmatic. I think it gets us to where we need to go. Although the small food cart vendors won't still they still have to close, but it's definitely more equitable. So thanks, Chief. Thanks, Julia, and thanks, Robert, for getting it done. Thank you.
All right. So time frame coming back on?
Yes, sir. So we fully anticipate that we can get something for introduction, barring any complication that gets raised, for the October 12th council meeting, so that it can be introduced. Then we can have any public hearing on it, and then hopefully get this wrapped up in October, early November at the latest. Because as Councilman Saccharin mentioned, this has been a question of equity and treating everybody equally and fairly. And so we want to get that done as soon as we can.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you for y'all's work on this. Any other questions, or Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Griffin, I think, had his hand up.
No?
Councilmember Saccharin and Mr. Somerville took the words right out of my mouth, just that we're going to send a really good message by being fair across the board.
Great, thank you. All right, so next up is council communications. We have a proposal to increase council members' salaries to $25,000 a year by Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a subject that I brought up because of, I think it's important, very important, to keep the healthy mixture of diversity and life experience on council. Because of, and we all know what we asked for when we signed up for this, so I'm somewhat preaching to the choir on this one. I haven't lobbied any of you all on this because you all know the job just as I do. It's kind of getting to the point that where we're evolving to either you have to be in private business or self-employed or retired. And if you say, well, why do you say that? It's the amount of time that it takes to commit it. You either have to have a very, very understanding. If you just have a job, a 9-to-5 job, you have to have a very, very understanding employer to be able to serve on this council. And I think if we ever evolve to the point to where I've always looked at myself coming to council as so much tongue in cheek is some people may be familiar with the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but I've always looked at myself as Mr. Smith came to city council to represent, small people who doesn't have a voice or can't come to a meeting. We all know that grassroots folk out there that aren't heard. I gave an example in an op-ed piece where, and most on council, Mr. Mayor was here, obviously Peter, and not the people who just got elected, but there was a motion to increase taxi cabs rates. I think it was something like 60%. And everybody around council drove. Everybody had cars. We didn't, I didn't give it a second thought. I thought it was reasonable. It's been long, I think 10 years since they'd had an increase. And it was Councilman Lewis who didn't drive, who happened to say, wait a minute, you all aren't thinking about a whole slice of people that help run this city. The people that work the second shift, the people that work at these restaurants, when the restaurants close at 10, by the time they clean up and set up, it's 11 o'clock or a little after. If they don't have a ride or a car, they got to get a cab. the people that work at the hospital, the orderlies and the sanitation people who help to clean the hospitals and work in the snack bars and stuff, when they get off at Roper, St. Francis, and others, he pointed out that Carter stopped running at 9 o'clock. I got to be frank, I didn't know that until he said that. Shame on me. But his voice, again, being a person who had his ear to the ground, those people who work the second shift, they can't take off to come to city council and say, what about us when you raise those rates? And he pointed out that if they got that kind of increase in transportation, they're not going to get a pay raise to offset it. As a result, there was an increase, but it didn't come close near to what it was. But for Councilman Lewis, who had worked his way from being a bag boy, as we would call it, at Piggly Wiggly, to being over the stockroom prior to his retirement, Councilman Lewis and Mitchell probably hear the voice of the unheard, probably more so than many on this council. I know it's certainly more so than I do. And I think if we ever lose that flavor on council, our city would have experienced a great loss. Whatever the compensation is for council, it is a stipend. I think we all know none of us get paid minimum wage. I don't think there's economists in the country that take the hours directly or indirectly involved with service, because that's what this is, public service. We give back. To say that the compensation we receive, many of us on this council donate our salaries to the causes that we would like. So we're not here, anybody who's here that just say you're gonna get rich being on city council and government, we need to talk, because that's not the place to be. Every council meeting, we vote on literally millions of dollars. But there are times when, in that great debate in the public square, where you have differences, and I'll give an example with Mayor Riley. For almost 20 years, accommodation and hospitality taxes were accumulated in this city, to the tune of about $300 million was spent only on the peninsula. A mayor of 35, 36 years experience, and the CFO at the time, respectfully, Steve Bedard, one of the finest CFOs ever to serve, said, tourists don't spend dollars off the peninsula. Well, obviously, we made the case that they do. And it's funny, Sunday, I was riding along Savannah Highway, and I passed Station 11 and the monument to the 9. And there are not any wires in front of that. And that's because Councilman Appel, Councilman Moody, it was a surplus in H-tax money one year. Knowing that Station 11 was going to be built, he said, it's a wonderful opportunity to start the undergrounding of wiring on Savannah Highway. So I was riding Sunday, and I got to that spot, admiring the station and the tower and all of that. Wow, looking at those wires going towards town on the right and left, it was a breath of fresh air and beauty, frankly. And why did accommodation sales tax dollars come there? Firemen and their families come from literally all over the country to visit that site. And it justified tourism dollars. I think it's Councilman Brady's district, but certainly right across from Councilman Appel's, the old WPL station was bought. Was, I think, the second allocation of hospitality tax and comedy, let's call them tourism dollars, to buy a waterfront spot that eventually will be a wonderful space for the public to enjoy, just off the Greenway, not far off the Greenway. Mr. Mayor, you spoke about it last night, the Carl Richardson Park, which looks across at the birthplace of South Carolina. It's in Councilman Saccharin's district. That was the first expenditure of tourism dollars West Ashley. How did that happen? Because council pointed out to one of the most experienced mayor and CFOs in the history of this town, and to the capital projects department. Remember, you work in capital projects for 15, almost 20 years. Every time those dollars came in, they were to be spent on the peninsula only. It was wrong, but it's been corrected, and certainly this mayor has certainly supported that. Another example I would get of council kind of having ears to the ground and obviously working through the executive, the mayor and others. A couple of years ago, I think, Mr. Mayor, we had the issue with where we had the $45 million overrun on the, to no fault of anybody, on the Spring Fishburne Cross, September Clock Spring Fishburne Drainage Highway Project. We didn't know where the money was coming from. It was a very painful vote for those just on council. We voted to commit 5 years of all the stormwater drainage dollars to finishing the Spring Fishburne $154 million project wasn't going to work as designed because we didn't have the money to finish it. The State Infrastructure Bank came up with a surplus. They put out advisory across the state. If you had small projects, 50 million and below, they would consider your application for a 50-50 match. Mayor Tecklenburg put in for some monies for the battery wall. We certainly needed that. But council said, hey, wait a minute, we don't have the money for this Spring Fishburne. It would create more useful dollars if we were to apply for this grant. At the 11th hour, the grant was applied for, the battery was denied, Spring Fishburne was granted, and $22.5 million has come forth in September Clock. And obviously we had the money to match. That project is now going to be completed, which allowed dollars like the $6 million project that's going over in South Windermere. The monies that's going over on Central Park Road. But for council saying, wait a minute, let's have another application, but for the mayor turning fast on his staff, I think they had less than a week to get that application in. Davis and Floyd worked along with city staff, along with the executive team, and that $22.5 million came through. It takes the confluence of both. It certainly takes going above and beyond. Councilman Seekings works on tirelessly on Carter. Council Lady Jackson, we probably have one of the best relationships with James Island and the town of James Island, certainly in a decade with the government in a intergovernmental group that she represents us so well on. So there are a number of things that goes above and beyond. Our last example I will give is when the pedestrian bike bridge was hung up in Washington. Katie Zimmerman came to a number of us, I know you too, me, and said, we need to get to Senator Grimm and Senator Scott. Because of personal relationships on this very council that still exists today. I know Councilman Shealy picked up the phone and called Senator Scott. I know I picked up the phone and called Senator Scott. I knew we reached out to other elected officials that did the same. This job goes way beyond, as we know, sitting on a council for this meeting and then a ways of meetings and then going home for 2 weeks and then coming back and repeating the process. So I wanted to give a couple examples. I appreciate the patience. I would like to make a motion that we move forward with increasing the salary. I've talked to colleagues and I'm certainly open for suggestions, and I know how it's been done in the past and I'm okay with that as well. Thank you. I see Councilman Sheed's hand.
A point of order, we put this item on the agenda as the way I understood, a discussion of the matter. So I think unless there's an emergency to justify amending the agenda, we would bring a formal ordinance to you at our next meeting. But we certainly can do that if that's the wish of council. Councilmember Shade.
I'll let Councilman Waring respond to that question.
Listen, I'm okay with that. Listen, I know how this has been done in the past. In the past, it's been done. I brought the subject up just for this same very reason, for a hearty open discussion. I know usually there's a committee that's been put together, okay, in the past, and they will make comparisons around the country and come back with a recommendation to council. I'm okay with doing that. I would hope, though, we can do that within this budget cycle. It shouldn't take us long to do that. And but I did have some discussion. If you would allow, I wouldn't mind listening to Councilman Shea had his hand up.
Okay, great. Councilmember Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I did call Councilmember Waring earlier this afternoon, and a handful of other council members that think the best way of doing this for the transparency of all is to form this either special commission or task force, whatever we call it, with a short leash on coming back and reporting to us a recommendation as to whether or not this is warranted. If so, to what level. We can do a comparison with other cities our size. To Councilmember Waring's point, the importance of our role here is that while none of us ran for this office, sought this position to make money, that's not why we're here. It does serve as a deterrent to folks who may want to serve as a financial wall of some sort. Our strength on this council is our collective diversity. While we sometimes vote for things unanimously, that's not always the case. We come from our opinions, from our different experiences in life, our different workplaces, our different education, our different everything. And that makes us a stronger council, which, to Councilmember Waring's point, makes us a stronger body for serving the needs of our community. He laid out a wonderful example of all the things that are big ticket items deserving of our attention and our need. And we're the largest city in the state of South Carolina. And not to sound arrogant, but our contribution as a city to the economic engine of the state and the economic engine of the region goes unnoticed at some point. So I think that perhaps we, when the time comes, we prepare an ordinance to address this with a citizen task force and include some former members of city council who had the experience of knowing what they had gone through in the past to do that. I'm not projecting anything of a particular size, how that's to be compromised, proposed, but I think it would behoove us all to do that and do it in very short order. It's not something long-term that we need to address. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Councilmember Waring, for bringing this up. You all know that I'm a young person that serves on this council, and there's not a lot of young people on council. It's difficult to do it. Councilmember Appel's young too, but we're very blessed in the positions that we're in at our jobs that we're able to do it. We're able to make all of the meetings. Councilmember Waring, I know you looked into it, and the number of meetings that we attend is exponential compared to what it was previously. And that's not a knock on anybody. It's just the time that we live in. We have everything is important. We live in an age where everybody wants answers immediately. And now we have this technology where we can hop on a Zoom call within a matter of a day or two notice, or even a few hours notice, and we do it every time. So the thought is a great thought. And I am torn on this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that there are deterrents to get young people to run. And I don't know if it's necessarily the pay, but it's the fact that we start meetings at 2:00 in the afternoon. You know, I mean, it's hard for anybody to work a job with the schedule of how we conduct our meetings. It's meant for somebody who is a sole proprietor or retired. Somebody that has an obligation to an employer is not going to be able to go to them and say, hey, I need to leave at 1 or 2 o'clock several times a week. And in a lot of cases, that's what we have to do. So I don't know if necessarily changing the pay And maybe that's what that committee can look at too, is some of the processes of how we conduct our business. And are we deterring young people from serving by having 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock meetings all of the time? I'm, hesitant about raising the salary. And the reason I say that is because I think that we need to be honest that we may only, take home a small financial amount of money. We do have amazing health benefits, and there's a pretty significant amount of money associated with the health benefits that we get. I would say we're at least a $40,000 a year position with the benefits that we have. And as we are still guiding through a pandemic, and we have had several, employees that have come to us and said, "Hey, look at our pay. What kind of message are we going to send if we, have a 30% increase to ourselves when we just, Amy just did everything she could to get 2.5% to 4% for our regular city employees." Now, there's a lot of times where we don't get what everybody else gets, and we can say that 17.5 is maybe a gross underpaying of where we should have been. But the fact of the matter is people are going to want to say that we gave ourselves a 30% increase, and that's going to be hard to justify. And I think that if we looked at some of the ways that we conduct our business and the time that we start, and that, maybe if we started a little later sometimes, or if we broke it up and did committee meetings, a week and a separate week, sort of like county council does, where they do their committee meetings the week before, and then the next week they have their county council meeting. Maybe we can look at that as a committee too, but I think it's a lot more than just the pay that deters young people from serving. And I think if we could look at some of those things, it would make us a very proactive city.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, council member. All right, is it kind of consensus that we'll form a committee, including just a few members of HR and legal and a council member or two? Does that sound reasonable on a short fuse?
Yes, sir. I'm just wondering if we can look at the template that was done in the past. I don't know how that committee was made up. I know the mayor had a heavy hand into it, but I would ask this. I would ask whatever council members you choose, I hope there would be councilmen or persons who serve, I would say, do it from Mother Emanuel up, because I think the Mother Emanuel experience, the George Floyd experience, and obviously now after that 2015 24 inches of rain in 48 hours, flooding has just been exponentially more important than it was 10 years ago. So the climate change issue, having served during those periods, matter. But anyway, the committee is the way to go. Okay, I'm good with that.
Great. All right. Well, I'll look back at how we did it last time before I was mayor, and then let y'all know a proposal. Councilmember Seekings?
Just a quick point of clarification and or question. If we're going to put this on the table and vote on it, particularly in the positive, I think Councilmember Waring, it has to be done during an election cycle. So we have to have some haste on this.
Like I said, we'd do it with a short fuse.
Right, like 30 days.
Right. Understood. All right.
Thank you all. Thank you all for that. Thank you very much.
Great. All right. So we're at our committee reports. First up, Committee on Traffic and Transportation, Councilmember Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Committee on Traffic and Transportation met yesterday afternoon at 2 o'clock. We heard from Ms. Devry Datoma from the Charleston County Public Works Department. She gave us an update on a number of things, one of which requires action, the other just requires you to know about them, and I think you'll be excited. There is a project trying to make accessibility to the bikeway in West Ashley safer and better. There's been a lot of things looked at. What they've come up with is a raised crosswalk along Battery Avenue right by the bikeway. It's a project that, because it's in the city, needs approval of this council. Our committee listened to what she had to say and approved it unanimously. And before I give you my next report, I'd ask that you approve that portion, and then I'll tell you what happens. the rest of the
Second.
time.
I move.
All right, any questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? You guys have it.
The next was an update from her just generally on some half-cent sales tax projects that are going on around the county and in the city, and then one that is not currently on the books but is being looked at, and I'll go backwards. One is the North Bridge bike ped separate facility from West Ashley over to North Charleston. They actually have a project person looking at it only. It's an incredibly complicated but really needed project. You all know that getting across the North Bridge in anything other than a car at 60 miles an hour is incredibly dangerous. And the county, I think, is dedicated to putting forward its best effort to come up with a project crossing from West Ashley to North Charleston for people on bikes, pedestrian, and the like. More to come on that, but they are working on it, and anything you all can do to encourage anyone you know at the county level to put that on the front burner, I think would be very good use of your time. We also got some updates on the half-cent sales tax monies that are being spent. I think the most interesting and important one is a project, Councilmember Pell, in your district, which is a reconfiguration in the Avondale area of 17. And I forget the cross street, Mr. Mayor, but it aligns the cross street coming past Gerald's Tires, puts a light there, really calms traffic coming off Magnolia, gives some more room to the parking spaces, to the retail there, and just calms and gives more accessibility in there. That's a funded project. It's in the design phase. So there is a good bit of work being done by the county in the city of Charleston. And we're going to ask Ms. Toma to come back on a regular basis and give us an update. So that's my report. More to come. And if y'all are interested, I will, and we can have the county sort of give us a regular monthly or quarterly update in sort of graphically, so you can see what's going on out there with the different projects.
Yes, sir. And that's why I was so thankful to Devery, because we truly have a lot of great partnering going on between us. Councilmember Shade and then Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to follow up on the comments that Chairman Seekins brought up about Northbridge, there's an event this Saturday, I believe begins at 2:00. It's at the brewery over off of Azalea. And it's a bike ride it's about 8 miles from that point over the North Bridge, coming back around Westminster Presbyterian Church and then back over. So there's a website about it. I'm glad to share that information with you, but Katie Zimmerman and her crowd have organized that to bring up awareness of the replacement or the addition of a pedestrian bicycle path for Northbridge. So I appreciate Councilmember Seekins for bringing that up, and I just wanted to make a plug for that event this Saturday at 2:00.
There is one other thing, Mr. Mayor, I forgot to mention, which is of great importance, and that is we got an update on the progress being made in the partnership between the county and the city in finally getting approval for design and the actual building of, drum roll, wait for it, for those who've been on council for as long as, for instance, Councilmember Waring, how about the Northern Pitchfork? That project actually is going to happen, we think. I think the ball is really right now in the city's court just to get a couple of the final stormwater approvals. And once that's done, then it gets back into the court of the county to go make that project a reality. So we're close, really close. And if you don't know Ms. Toma, she is very sort of conservative in her reporting, and you could hear in her voice she really believed where we were and it was moving forward. So I take that as a very good sign. And given the numbers that we've seen of people now living in District 5, a welcome relief point for those going on and off Johns Island. So it's coming. Hold your breath. Here we go.
That's right. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. Primarily, Councilmember Shade said what I wanted to about featuring the Charleston Moves event over the North Bridge at 2:00 on Saturday. But I wanted to make it clear that even people who are like me and my husband, no gear, beach bike riders, we're welcome to go and walk. I'm not riding with those high charged commuter bikers, but I'm definitely going to walk over the bridge. And I think that group just goes one time, starts in West Ashley and goes to the brewery at 4 o'clock. I also am very excited about the progress. It's great to get reports that, you know, the money that taxpayers pay in through the county through sales to their sales tax literally have a lot of tangible results. And she did not go over a lot of the things that are currently underway on James Island in particular, or other places on West Ashley. This one was targeted on the few things that she said were sort of new to our radar screen. But to my constituents on James Island, we definitely have all the things that we've been talking about for a few years out of the 2016 half-penny sales tax underway.
Terrific. Was that the end of your report, Councilmember Seekings?
That is the end of my report, Mr.
Good.
Mayor.
Great. Thank you so much for that. That was good. Committee on Public Works and Utilities, Councilmember Waring.
Mayor, the Committee on Public Works met 4 o'clock yesterday. And as you see outlined on your agenda, item A1 passed unanimously, and I so move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 And thank you. The last piece of information I'd just like to share, Mr. Fountain did give a very good small project update, and very informative to the committee. He's got that information available to push out to all council members, and I certainly would recommend. I can't tell you how impactful these small drainage projects are, and out in every community. They're going on all over 12 districts. Please reach out for questions in your area to Mr. Fountain. With that, that's the extent of my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And Councilmember Saccharin, did you want to be recognized?
Yeah, I just wanted to also add to that. We had a Hughie and King Street last night had a information session for folks in the public, and I just want to give kudos to Matt and his team and the partners that were out. I know Councilman Mitchell and I were there. Happy to report we had somewhere between 20, maybe 25 folks come out, which is a lot. But I just want to say kudos to Matt's team for offering that information session for folks in the neighborhood.
Thank you. They need to hear that, because they're working hard. I mean, double time around the city, and they need to hear that. Thank you. That's my report, Mr. Mayor.
So next up is our Committee on Ways and Means.
Move for approval.
Second.
Move for approval as amended, Mr. Mayor.
Correct.
As amended.
I second with the amendment.
All right. Any questions, discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it.
And Mayor, I'm sorry, we need to hold the vote on L1 because we have to approve the annexations, which are M1 through M3 first.
Correct. Gotcha. So that takes us to bills for second reading. We have 10 items.
Move 1 through 10 except for.
I'd recommend we take number 4 separately, if that's okay with everyone. Okay.
So move 1 through 3 and 5 through 10.
Second.
I'm sorry, repeat that for me.
Motion to approve 1 through 3 and 5 through 10.
1 through 3 and 5 through 10. It's been moved and we have a second. Any discussion on any of those items? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it.
So moved.
Next up.
Second. We got to do third reading, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Oh, right. Now for third reading and ratification of 1 through 3 and 5 through 10. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. So next up is our second reading of the mask mandate ordinance. And before I open for discussion, I was going to go ahead and ask council to consider a motion to defer this tonight. And I would like to explain why very briefly. We got great news from Dr. Sweat. Numbers are moving in the right direction, thankfully. That's a blessing that our cases numbers are down, particularly in Charleston County. Hospitalization rates are still serious, but they're down and going in the right direction. Importantly, vaccination rates are up. And if you just drill down on the zip codes in the city of Charleston, we believe our vaccination rate is about 67% using DHEC information. We do still have the mandate in city buildings and public schools in Charleston County and county public buildings, County of Charleston, a requirement to wear masks, and we ask all citizens to comply with that. We still have our resolution in place, which strongly recommends the wearing of masks in all buildings where people are together, and also highly recommends everyone get a vaccine. So that's still in place. So the numbers are running in the right direction. And as Dr. Sweat mentioned, we got so many arrows in the quiver. We're watching the numbers, which leads me to make this deferral motion to you tonight. But we're going to continue to follow the numbers. And if something happens like happened in the UK or this winter, a surge were to occur, this item will remain on items for second reading so that we could bring it back very easily and be more responsive in a timely manner. So anyway, I just wanted to share that explanation for my reason for deferral. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Ayes.
Nay.
Mr. Mayor.
Just for the record, we had 2 nays, Councilmember Griffin and Councilmember Shealy.
Great. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Griffin, would you like to?
Yes, sir. I just want to explain my vote. I'm voting because I still think that this ordinance has a lot of issues in it, especially the fact that we've still got, you can write tickets to minors. And I think that, deferral's great. It needs to go away for a while. We need to watch the numbers. But in the meantime, we need to look at this ordinance again and try to get some of these things cleared up, because I don't think any one of us has intention of writing a ticket to a 12 or 13-year-old over not wearing a mask. So I think we need to still try to clear up some of that language. If the numbers spike big time, I can understand bringing it back up. But I just hope over the next few weeks, while we got some time, if we could look at that thing again and try to just make it a little bit more common sense.
All right, thank you. We appreciate that comment. Anyone else? All right, so now we can go back to just the bill for third reading, L1.
Move for approval.
Second.
To approve. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. There are no bills up for first reading. We do have an item on the agenda for an executive session regarding legal advice regarding the Charleston School of Law transaction. So I would need a motion to go into executive session.
I move for approval.
Actually,
I don't think we need it, Mr. Mayor.
I don't think we need it
that
either,
was
Mr.
there
Mayor.
just in case there was something that came up, and nothing has come up. So I don't think that we need a motion to go into executive session. We need a motion to adjourn.
I
Okay.
move that we adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
great. I didn't know. No one had informed me of that. Thank you for that update. We have a motion to adjourn. Any
Mr. Mayor.
further business to come before us?
Mr. Mayor, the clerk has her hand up.
Who
Yeah.
did?
The clerk.
Madam Clerk.
I know everyone's excited because we're going to get out before 7:30. But I wanted to see if it would be possible at our next meeting just to get an update on the portrait for Vanessa Turner Maybank. It was about a year ago. You might remember that the city commissioned a portrait of her. And so I was just hoping that maybe we could get an update at the next meeting. We've had some interest in the public. And so just wanted to see if maybe we could do that at not the next meeting, an upcoming meeting.
Great.
That was all.
That's good. We'll do that.
I got my check, Keith.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Next meeting, we're going to call on Council Waring for that. Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, thank
Councilmember
you.
Jackson.
While our clerk has been speaking, it occurred to me that I meant to say this while we were approving the minutes for August 17th. I printed those minutes out because I remember that meeting all too viscerally. And it's 101 pages of transcribed minutes. So that's mind blowing. You all can't continue to work at that pace. I do think that we should continue to be considering some of the suggestions that our clerk's office made to us earlier in the year. I know that we had a lot of, personal challenges and reasons why we really do like the transcription way of producing minutes, but I don't think we can continue to do that either. So if we can have shorter meetings, that would be great, but we can't always plan on that either. So thank you very much, Ms. Cook, and all of your clerk staff. It blew me away when I saw how many pages it was.
Thank you.
Agreed. Councilmember Waring.
And thank you. On that same line, it was brought to my attention, believe it or not, by the clerk's office, but for a long time, council used to get their minutes on Thursday. And it's actually during Timmy Mallett's time when he was insisting about getting it on Wednesday. I get my council minutes on Thursday. Obviously, the email goes out sooner, but I think that 1 day differential, what all that clerk's office has to do, meet with you on the agenda, et cetera, and get those minutes out to all of us by Wednesday of the week. I think it would be great if we could go back to have at least giving them 1 more day to prepare and get those minutes out. If we got those minutes on Thursday, the truthful part about how many of us really mind all those minutes on the day that we get them. We get them, we look at them, we go over them over the weekend. We tweak it again on Monday. I think it would be great if we could go back to Thursday, being the time that council members themselves actually get the minutes. I'm sure, I can't speak for her, but I believe that would help Ms. Cook and her team very much.
Well, I'll get with Madam Clerk and we'll revisit this whole matter of our minutes, and maybe there's sections of our meetings that we don't have to do verbatim transcription.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor, I mean, there's another way to deal with the issue. If we don't have enough resources, okay, in our clerk of council to accommodate the workload, then we need to increase staffing. That's another consideration, Mr. Mayor. I definitely would have a problem with abbreviated council member records. But I do think that if we have an issue and it's a staffing issue, then we need to give Madam Clerk the resources that she needs in order to meet our needs.
Right. Well, I appreciate that, but I would also have us consider, whether there's some steps that they're currently doing that are really necessary, that we have to hire somebody to do that. Or do you really need to transcribe the public participation period of our meetings, for example? It's just something we should delve into a little more.
I think so. Okay.
We'll come back to you.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Councilmember Griffin.
Just one more final note, Mr. Mayor. I bumped into Richard Davis at the Epic Center the other day. And he mentioned to me that he would be happy to host us for a city council meeting at no cost to the city. They have a theater room that can seat 100 people. Maybe we can look into doing a meeting over there. It would be good to get some foot traffic over there. And he would not charge us at all. So I'd love it if we could try to do that by the end of the year.
All right. Well, when we go back on the road again, which might be soon, we can talk to Ginger and Richard. Good idea. All right. Anybody else? Hearing nothing else, we stand adjourned. Thank y'all.